After years of breaking down doors, betrayal, and Elysium, the first major campaign of independent contractors has finally come to a close. For our next campaign, we're going to be taking a break from the world of Terra and visiting the frozen and mysterious hilltops of Tibet. But before we get there, I need to explain some stuff. Outside of this channel, I've been a DM for nearly a decade, and something that I've always liked to do is put all of my campaigns in the same shared universe. One small problem with that: someone trying to jump into a world with 8 years of background lore is going to be a little rough. So, let me introduce you to my version of Earth. As a heads up, please remember that this is all Dungeons & Dragons. While some of the places I talk about are real, this is ultimately a fantasy world with magic, fae, and giant mechs.
Calm down, son. It's just a drawing, not the real thing.
The TLDR is that this world is basically Fate Stay Night mixed with Shadowrun. A much longer explanation can break down the major events of the world into a timeline with 3 distinct eras: before the Gates, the Magical Revolution, and after the Gates. Before the Gates opened, the world was very similar to our own. All of the countries, continents, and their histories are mostly the same. The one exception being that magic is, or at least was, real. Many, many years ago, back in the age of myths and gods, magic used to flourish within this world. Many of the monsters from fairy tales actually walked the earth. Dragons soared amongst the skies, and heroes etched their names into history. Yet, for reasons unknown, mana slowly started to fade away from this world. Beings that relied on mana, such as dragons or fae, either died out or went into hiding, and many human mages, such as wizards or witches, were reduced to a sad shell of their former selves. Spells could still be cast, but eventually the only people that could cast them were the families with old and powerful bloodlines. As years turned into centuries, and magic continued to disappear from this world, most mage families became extremely reclusive. They only talked amongst themselves, and started to become very secretive over the small list of spells that their family had managed to hold on to. Those that didn't shut themselves off from the world entirely tended to create secret societies to try and keep the flame of magic alive in a world that was slowly forgetting it. All of this means that even though magic still does technically exist, we get a world that very closely resembles our own near the end of the pre-Gate era in the 1900s. So what is a gate? Paris, France, 1935. It is the middle of the bloodiest war in history when a strangely thick fog starts to settle around the French capital. It stays there for a couple of days, and in that time people begin to notice oddities. A human with green skin and long ears is spotted. A beast thought to have only walked in myth is photographed. There were some attempts to study this bizarre mist, but it was only there for about a week, and Paris had more pressing concerns at the time. The only thing they knew for certain was that anything or anyone that went inside the swirling fog was never seen again. Many years later, this phenomenon would be known as the first documented gate. New York, USA, 2025. During the election of a new mayor, the city that never sleeps is enveloped in a dense fog that nearly blocks out the sun. Unlike the small gate that opened in Paris, this one cannot be overlooked nor covered up. Elves, dwarves, and demons start to flood the streets. Entire sections of the city are swallowed by the mist, and the few mages that live there can feel a shift as magic returns to the air. The chaos almost brings the US to war with the beings from the mist, but eventually everything is solved peacefully. This wasn't an invasion. Many of the magical beings don't even know how they ended up here. Some went back into the mist searching for home, but many settled down and eventually integrated themselves into human society. After the gate in New York, many more started to appear across the world in a much shorter span of time. Many more people tried to do research into the mist, but found no concrete answers on what it actually is. They're only called gates because they seemingly act as a portal, but why they are appearing, what or even when is on the other side of that portal is still unknown. Just try to imagine this for a second. You're a normal person living in New York. You work a 9 to 5, come home and play some League of Legends. You get really angry at this stupid Master Yi that won't gank your lane, so you accidentally cast Fireball on your monitor. Welcome to the New Age. For literal centuries, magic was something that was hidden away and forgotten about. Only families with blood ties to the age of gods could weave the small fragments of mana that remained in the air into spells. Now Dave from the Bronx can cast Explosion. This changes things. Too many things to cover in this video, so I'll stick to the major things that are related to the upcoming campaign. From a country's perspective, this was like discovering oil for the second time. Mana and magic could be used in an infinite number of ways. It could be combined with technology to create things straight out of science fiction. It could be used as a power source, and of course, it could be weaponized. Mana flooded out of each of the gates into its surroundings, and that fact alone was enough to change entire countries. 2 major gates eventually opened in the United States, one in the eastern state of New York and the other in the western state of California. This started to cause friction between the East and West. In India, a powerful warlock by the name of Meliana started to use dark magic to slowly gain power within the country. While a major gate never opened in the country of Russia, many smaller ones started to enter the countryside and cause division amongst the people. In London, the largest of the old mage societies opened their doors to the public and began to share some of their arcane secrets with the populace. Finally, no major gate ever opened in China. However, not willing to simply watch as the rest of the world got to explore magic, they decided to try and create their own gate. Around the year 2067, people around the world started to notice that something was wrong. The mist that had been randomly appearing and flooding the world with mana slowly started to fade away. Enter the current era and a massive resource crisis. Imagine again, you now live your life in a world where you can cast magic to do the dishes while you teleport to work. But as you go to cast Dimension Door, it doesn't work. This is bad. After the magical revolution, many people and countries had begun to rely on magic, so much so that the thought of living without it seemed insane. People started to dig, not only into the ground for magical ley lines, but also into our past to see if the legends of the arcane were true. Some magical beasts that had finally come out of hiding began to be hunted to extinction and harvested for their mana, and eventually all of this led to war. The friction in the US rose to a civil war between East and West, resulting in the country literally fracturing itself into two with a magical weapon that ended the conflict. In India, the now tyrant Meliana turned the country into the Empire of Ishvalda and began to conquer the surrounding nations with Magitech behemoths. While not as severe as the United States, much of Russia eventually became fractured into different factions that all held different allegiances. And finally, the man-made gate in China was successfully created in the year 2080, and it was by far the largest gate the world had ever seen. So large in fact that it could not be controlled, leaving much of the mainland swallowed in the fog itself. The current year is 2095. Much of the mana that filled the air during the magical revolution has faded. There's still enough in most places for normal people to cast spells, but not enough to sustain entire countries that are powered by it anymore. People that had become used to the joys that magic could bring to everyday life are beginning to grow desperate. Enter a small village at the base of Mount Everest in Tibet. So small that you would never even find it on a web search. No one has even heard of this place, and no one knows its name. Here, in a village that is isolated from much of the stuff that I've talked about so far, an ancient secret is revealed. A ley line, one of the most rich and powerful, is revealed to the world. But how had it gone unnoticed until now, and what secrets lie within its forgotten caves? Please look forward to it.